Hello everybody, this is Krista and welcome back to Adventures in Metaphysics. Today I am really excited to join in on a tag created by Kyra Getchell here on YouTube, and it is the 12 Decks for 12 Houses challenge. And I do not know too much about astrology, but I'm very interested in it. My brain cannot tend to wrap around all of the details involved. But I actually had a solar return reading with Kyra yesterday morning for my birthday at the end of the month, and it was such an incredible reading. I'm really glad I got to have that with her. She is so full of information, and she's just so friendly and just full of life and joy. It was an awesome experience. I did a live reading with her, which was really cool. I've never done a live reading like that. But yeah, she went through my chart with me. We did a tarot reading about it. There's a lot of cool things going on my solar return. Apparently, the time of my exact solar return is also the exact time that the new moon eclipse is happening. I mean, isn't that just... I feel like that just has to be so significant, so we talked a bit about that for a while. Anyhow, I was really glad to be able to do that with her before filming this challenge. I actually almost filmed it beforehand. I'm glad I didn't though, because she really explained more about the houses, because I'm not really familiar with them. So I was gonna film yesterday, but I spent so much time like reshuffling around my choices because I was like, no, it's all wrong now. Now that I've, learned a little bit more. Okay, so I think we should just get right into it. Sorry, the lighting is a little bit weird. I've got some sun coming right over here. So for our first house, this is all about self-identity and doing work around sort of how we kind of view ourselves and our sense of identity, really. So the deck I chose for that is my Playful Heart Tarot. Now, I chose this one first and foremost because it just really feels like me, if that makes sense. Just with all the colors and the fun illustrations. It reminds me of... It reminds me of the, I guess, childlike nature I tend to have, and is something I've really grown to love about myself. And I think this represents also, in terms of working through things in the first house, accepting that part of myself has been a really hard thing for a long time. I've really tried to resist being this way, and I guess having the kind of personality that I do. So this deck has really done a lot to help me work through that. I originally bought it as an inner child deck, and I feel like I keep saying that I don't do inner child work, but I realize that sounds a little bit, I don't know if high horsey is the right word, but like a little bit. And I realize that my wording isn't right there. So I don't mean that I don't do inner child work. Inner child work is really important, I think, anyway. That's my opinion. I guess what I more mean is that I don't feel like I do inner child work or need to do inner child work in a sense of working to draw that out of myself. I guess more what I do when I realize, it is inner child work that I'm doing, is that I am working to remove the blocks I have around this side of myself that's very apparent. That inner child is very apparent in me, and I've never really felt like I lost that, but I feel myself pushing it away. Does that make sense? Anyway, I just wanted to clarify. So I bought this deck for inner child work, though, in the sense of drawing it out of myself. And I love that card. I've talked about it before. We don't need to go into it, but the strawberry hat, so good. I tried to use it in that way, and it wasn't reading in that way, which I didn't have a problem with. I just kind of wrote it off as this isn't an inner child work deck for me. And it's just kind of clicked in my head recently of like, that's not what I need to be doing. I don't need inner child work in that way. I need it in this whole other realm. And I realized how this was reading, it was telling me that. So this has really helped work through a lot of self-identity things, of just learning to not really be embarrassed or ashamed of just the ways that I am. So that is the Playful Heart Tarot, and that is my deck for the first house. Now for the second. The second is all about, sorry, if I'm scratching my nose, it's allergy season. I promise I'm not picking it. So the second house is all about personal resources, and I kind of see that as the Pentacles suit, I guess, where it doesn't necessarily need to be monetary or what's the word I'm thinking of? Not tangible, material. Doesn't need to be material items, but you can look at it as kind of like anything you have to expend, so like energy or time, things of that sort. And what's interesting and what was discovered in the reading with Kyra is that that house is in my south node. I'm hoping I'm remembering this correctly. But my north node is in the 9th house of spirituality and all those things. South node is in the personal resources. And so that is something that is really apparent for me to be working on. And I know I do. I know I need to work on that. I have a really weird things, honestly, specifically around material items. I've got a lot of blocks around spending money on myself, really buying anything. I've got just a lot of weird shame, I guess, tied to those kinds of things. And I just lost my train of thought. Bummer. Oh, Kyra was saying that, so I have a Virgo rising, and Virgos apparently are very known to be very hard on themselves. And so these two things tied together were just a recipe for me just thinking I should never get things for myself. Basically, that's the personal thing for me. But again, personal resources is really anything you can expend, which in reality is something I have a hard time with too, spending time on myself, energy on myself. I really always want to be in the giving position. Anyways, hopefully I'm not rambling too much. I'm so excited about this reading I got. It was just so good. So hopefully I'm not rambling too much about it. We're going to keep showing the decks. So my deck for this is the Majestic Earth Tarot. And the first reason I picked this was I feel like it symbolizes all of the things I get stuck on and a lot of things about this house, where even down to this bougie little bag I got it in. And of course, this deck was a bit of a splurge for me. So that was really hard, and it was a big, I realize it sounds weird that like buying myself something is like getting over a hurdle in some way, but it really was. So this one really represents this house for me in that way. But also, another thing is that my chart is very intensely Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign. And so using resources for me usually tends to need to be kind of tangible in some way, if that makes sense. And so this deck also just feels really rooted to that earth energy, which is where I feel a lot of my resources lie, if that makes any sense. It makes sense in my head. I'm hopefully not just talking nonsense. I could be. But I hope you get what I'm saying. I feel like I'm rambling a lot. I am very sorry. I feel like I'm talking out of my butt about something I don't know that much about. Oh well. So, this is the Majestic Earth Tarot, and this is my deck for personal resources. Now, you know, we're just going to leave a bit of a deck mess going on, because I don't want to waste all your time putting my decks in bags. Third house is communication, and sort of communicating, I can't say that word. Communication issue. I mean, there's one right there. I cannot speak. So, my deck for that is the Reclaim Oracle. And the reason I chose this one is because I find when I have anything to do around communication that I need to look at or work on, it's usually because I'm not understanding, or not really not understanding what the other person is feeling. Usually that's something I am very, very good at pinpointing, but it's more not understanding what they might need in that moment, if that makes sense. So I can tend to be pretty exacting, especially when it comes to communicating, where I can tell, oh, that person is sad. But I guess that's kind of sometimes where it ends for me, where going beyond that and kind of thinking like, okay, well, that person is sad, here's why, and here's what they might need. Does that make any sense? And I feel like this deck really helps me get to the bottom of that, especially when my own emotions are involved. I guess I should have clarified with that first, is when I'm also having some kind of high emotion, my ability to do what I was just saying kind of, it goes away a little bit. So I like using these cards because I can kind of pull them out and I can say, this person is mad at me. I'm not understanding why. Like, please help. And I'll pull out a card and it'll show an emotion, or I'll pull out two and it's kind of pinpoints like what that person is feeling and maybe why. So I just feel like this deck is so clear and to the point. It doesn't hold anything back. And it's just an amazing communicator and really helps me to understand more when I am in a moment of high emotion. That's when I like to pull these cards out, because when I am cool as a cucumber, I can reason out most things and figure it out. It's when I'm also having a high emotion that we go into a little bit of a panic mode, and I'm not gonna lie. So that is my deck for the third house. Fourth is about root work and the home and ancestry. And I knew right away what deck this was going to be, because this house is all connected to that earth energy, which I love. So for me, that is the Gentle Tarot. Now, this just combines all of the above mentioned things about the fourth house, where it helps me really connect to the earth. That's my favorite card. Connect to the earth, which if I'm doing any sort of root work, it usually revolves around me connecting to nature or going outside and being present with that earth energy. That's something I'm really working on. But it also has this hint of kind of ancestral work running through it, I think. And it just really feels like, I don't know, it's comforting to a point of it feeling very homey, if that makes sense. I love using this one out in my own backyard. And it just, yeah, I don't know, it feels really connected to all of those things to me. So this is my deck for the fourth house of like root work, home, and ancestry. Now, the fifth house is all about joy and that inner child kind of joy, that like real sparky kind of energy, if that makes any sense. And the deck that reminds me of this is my Forest of Enchantment Tarot. I have loved this deck right from the start. It just really makes me think, oh, another favorite card. I love that little badger. It reminds me of the magical world I kind of existed in my head as a kid, and a place I always wanted to be. And I just love, I don't know, this kind of artwork and anything with like mythical or mystical surroundings really excites me in that inner child kind of way. Especially like when I'm at the library and I'm looking through some of our books and I find an old picture book I've never seen before. And it's got this really magical artwork like this. Oh, it brings me right back to being a kid. And that's what this deck does for me in a sense. It just sparks that joy, and I love this one. It's so magical. And just the idea of a magical forest. It's something I've always loved. So, this is my deck for the 5th house, and it is the Forest of Enchantment. Now, the next one was a little bit, probably the most tricky one for me to pick out. And the 6th house is all about physical health and your day-to-day routine. And the one I picked for this is the Shimmering Veil Tarot, because I don't really do really anything, I would say, with checking in about physical health. So I wasn't super sure what to pick, but I think if I were to do a check-in like that, this is the one I'd want to use, because I think if I was doing a physical check-in, I'd probably be focused on, I guess, energy, if that makes any sense. And this deck really feels like the images are made to represent like the energy running through everything. So that's what it made me think of. And in terms of day-to-day routine, I feel like that's something I check in about a lot too, if I'm kind of feeling off in a certain way, or I have some kind of high energy I'm not understanding. I like this deck for that reason, because the pictures are a little bit abstract. And it just feels like energy drawings, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know, this one made sense for me in this category. So this is my 6th house, and that is the Shimmering Veil Tarot. Now, the 7th house is all about personal relationships. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of the times if I'm asking things about personal relationships, there's a lot, I would honestly grab any deck. It would more be something that brought me comfort, I guess, if that makes any sense. But one that I picked out that I think would work really well, and I do actually really want to now use in this way, is the Tarot of Mystical Moments. Now, this house, it can be talking about, you know, romantic relationships, but it doesn't have to be. It can be friendships, just anyone close to you. And I just think this one can work so well because it makes things just a little bit abstract, where it will separate you out a little bit, if that makes sense. I feel like sometimes if I have questions about personal relationships, I know when I go into the readings, I am totally biased about it. And I need something that's going to pull me out of my own head. And this one really does that, because there's so much to look at in these pictures, and it feels a little bit magical and mystical. And it also, I don't know, it's soft and a little bit romantic. Oh, I really like this deck. I think it would work really well in readings for personal relationships. So this is my deck for the 7th house of personal relationships, and that's the Tarot of Mystical Moments. So The 8th house is all about grief and death, I suppose. I think I'm remembering that right. But my deck for that is my Crow Tarot. And I looked at this house as thinking of it in terms of the death card, of not necessarily death in the sense of like someone around you passing away, but maybe even like grieving old parts of ourselves, or old things we used to do, or old people we used to know and maybe we don't talk to anymore. That's how I looked at it, because I think we can all relate to that a little bit, of as you kind of grow and learn more about yourself, there's going to be things that you used to do or people you used to see that it just doesn't make sense anymore. And while, of course, growing is amazing, there's going to be things that you miss about that old self. Maybe not. I think sometimes I maybe feel that way sometimes, but I use this deck to work through that feeling. This one just feels really connected to spirit for me. It feels connected to my personal growth. And I just find that it works really well for that kind of reading, of working through feelings of almost, I don't know if it's that I miss things about me, but it feels odd to me to feel so disconnected from an old version of myself, if that makes sense. That's a really odd feeling. And so this deck really helps me make sense of that. I love this deck. Ugh. I'm just gonna keep showing cards because I like it. Okay, so that is the Crow Tarot, and that's my deck for the 8th house of grief. Does anyone else feel like that word is kind of weird? Grief. I feel like I'm not saying it's, I know I'm saying it right, but it feels like a word that I'm saying it wrong. I don't know. So the 9th house, which is where my sun sign is, which is so exciting, I didn't know that, is all about spirituality and higher learning. And so Kyra's prompt for this was a deck for spiritual growth. And what I picked for that is my El-Goliath Tarot. I originally had the Pagan Otherworlds, actually, because that one feels so spiritual to me. But after my reading with Kyra, I just recognized how much work I had to do to feel comfortable in how earthy I am, I guess you could say. Like, it was so crazy to see how heavy my chart leans towards, specifically Taurus, and how a lot of my habits and ways I think about myself are just directly fighting with that. And I've always leaned towards kind of earthy animal decks and have thought that that kind of work would be good for me, but I've resisted it. So I pulled out the El-Goliath Tarot because I think this is going to be one that's really important for me, because I've decided to commit to my natural ways and the ways that I know are going to ultimately make me grow the most and make me the most happy, and that's going to be connecting with that earth element that is so vital to me and working with it instead of fighting with it. So I'm really excited to start doing more work with around nature and animals. I'm really excited about it because it's always something that I've loved, and I feel like I've already talked about it so much. I just didn't figure out ways to do that. But I think this deck is really going to help me work through those blocks I have around the tendencies I have as a Taurus, which is needing to move slowly, being stubborn, and working with that again instead of against it. So I'm really excited about this. I think this deck is going to be really awesome for that. So that is my deck for the 9th house, and that is the El Goliath Tarot. Now, the 10th house is all about your life's work and questions around that and sort of the path you're meant to lead and career and things like that. So I couldn't help but think about my career as a children's librarian and how important that is to me. It is a job I love. It's a job that is fulfilling for me. So the deck I chose for that is my Mons Tarot. I chose this one because I needed to have a deck that had that little bit of fun and whimsy in it. Woo! And this deck just always reminds me of the children's room in our library that I work in. Just with the bright colors, like, I almost wish I could get posters of this and hang it around the children's room because it wouldn't look out of place. That's the thing. But this is a deck that does not hold back from me. So how it works so well is that it brings me to that career headspace very easily, but not necessarily always in a fun and playful way, because of course there are serious things I need to work through and consider when it comes to working to build a space where everyone feels welcome. And that's not always easy. If I was in a world where it just my opinion mattered and what I wanted to do mattered, it would be very easy, but sometimes you're gonna run into people who don't necessarily like what you're doing, and that's not easy for me. I like people to like what I'm doing and be happy, and I realize that in doing the thing that's so important to me and making sure that I have a safe space for every child, if teens want to come, just making that a safe space for everyone and making sure that everyone feels represented and seen in the books that I have readily available. Not everyone's gonna like that. And I'm working to become okay with that and just let it be what it's gonna be. So this deck has really helped a lot with that. Sorry, there is such intense sunlight. Well, what are you gonna do? So that is the Mons Tarot, and that is my deck for the 10th house. Now, my deck for the 11th house, which is all about community relations, is, where is it? Oh, there it is. My Ancestry Tarot. So I chose this one because I find when I am connecting through tarot with others, especially those who maybe don't read tarot themselves, having a deck that has people a lot of the times works the best, I find. And this is probably my most people-y, near modern deck that I have, and I just find that everyone really likes this one. I love this one. I think it reads super well. We're gonna try and adjust how I'm sitting right now so I don't get too washed. Oh my gosh, whatever. I think it just gives really clear readings, and I just think it's one that most people can relate to. This is one I like to bring to work a lot when we do our fun Fridays of tarot readings. And this one just always seems to be one that people lean towards. And it's just a really great little deck, and I think this is one that a lot of people can easily connect to. There we go! We're normal lighting again. So, for my 11th house of community relations, I picked the Ancestry Tarot. Now we are on to the last one, and that is the 12th house, which is all about mental health. And so Kyra's prompt was, what deck do you use to really dig deep into mental health? And for me, it's my Hilda tiles, which I feel like is kind of surprising because it's really not a classic shadow work deck, but something that I really have to spend a lot of time digging into is, sorry, I'm trying to get a few of these out so I can like quickly show you. Okay, so the reason I pick this is because when I am digging into mental health, a lot of the times it has to do with body image issues, which is something that I've been working through for a long time. And this deck, I think because it shows me a figure who is so comfortable in her own skin and so beautiful because of that confidence, if that makes sense, that this has just been the most helpful thing. And it's just really helped me a lot whenever I'm having hard moments with that, which luckily are fewer and further between. Did I say that right? Whatever. Fewer and farther between. This is always the one I pull out for that, and I think I just had to pick this one because that's kind of been my biggest mental thing, I guess you could say. Hopefully I'm not oversharing. Well, it's already out there. Anyhow, that is my deck for the 12th house, which is all about mental health, and those are my Hilda tiles, which I absolutely love. They're also just so fun to pull from because you get to like shake the bag. Anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed. I had so much fun. Sorry if I was just rambling on and on. Again, this isn't a topic I'm too familiar with, but I just really wanted to try it out after having that amazing reading with Kyra yesterday. So those were my 12 decks for 12 houses, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.